Welcome to Northern Trust and welcome to Twin Proximity. Twin Proximity continued. Our big thanks to Tom South, who is the one guy standing up here still talking. Tom and the whole Northern Trust team have been extraordinary. We couldn't be here without them. That's actually literally the case. So a big thanks. We've got a lot to go through this morning, and hopefully this won't be the last conversation we'll have about this concept of proximity and AI and all those things. But what I'd like to do is set a stage. What is this proximity thing? And then I'm going to be joined on stage by three people who are leading the proximity revolution. And we're so blessed to have the three of them with us. I think you'll understand later on. So thanking not only Northern Trust, but also Imperial College Business School in London. Mark and David, who are here, flew all the way from London. Willis Towers Watson, WTW, Open Innovation Lab of Norway, where is Ingvar. Many thanks, and Marketing for Wellness. So part of the reason I started thinking about proximity was we need better foresight. We need better foresight when the world changes faster. A lot of people have had this concept that it's changing so fast, you can't do long-term strategy, just forget about it, just iterate fast. And that's actually a dangerous notion. I think we should iterate fast and figure out what works. But the more things are changing, the more volatile they are, the better the foresight we must have. Otherwise, we end up solving the wrong problems. What do I mean? So let me give you an example. Before COVID, I was speaking for the leadership team of one of the large bond rating agencies in the United States. And they showed me a list of projects they were doing with innovation teams. And I love this model. You identify a challenge, you allocate it out to a team of 8 or 10 people from around the company, and you give them a limited amount of time and a small amount of money, and you say, run at this. I love that approach. Well, one of the names of one of the teams was 2 months to 2 weeks. And I said, well, what is this? And they said, well, Professor, we have a problem. We have an offering to the market, a critical offering. From the time the client signs the contract to the time we deliver is 2 months. Now, we know digital is fast, and so we have to get faster. We have to get a lot faster. So we challenged the team to go from 2 months to 2 weeks. And I said, first of all, congratulations, that's bold. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a challenge where you had to take something from 2 months to 2 weeks, but that's hard work. I said, but here's the problem. What happens if you go through all of that effort? Your team succeeds. You take it to market. You're doing it in 2 weeks, and then soon after, somebody can do the same thing in 2 minutes. Now, you have wasted all of your time and effort for nothing. And they deflated, and they realized, one of the execs said to me, this is a quote, Professor, do you know what we do? We're a bond rating agency. We take data, and we analyze it. That's it. We don't do anything else. There's no scenario where sometime in the next 3 years, 5 years, 7, I don't know, someone will be able to do exactly the same thing in 2 minutes. Now, this is why we need better foresight. Now, I'm happy to say they changed the challenge. I can't tell you what the offering was because it's confidential. But if you do some research, you can figure out what it was. Used to take 2 months, it now takes a few days. And the few days is not a technology challenge. It's a compliance issue, thankfully. 2 months to 3 days. So we have to have better foresight. Now, in 2014, I was at a tech conference, and I was watching the 174th time that I saw that old slide about Moore's Law. You remember that? Anybody been to tech? There was a 10-year period where every speaker had a Moore's Law slide. And like, really, after the 25th time of seeing it, I really don't need to see it again. So I'm thinking in my head, we must be able to do better. We must be able to figure out what's a common underlying dynamic that digital drives in the economy that could give us foresight as to where the world is going to go? Not where it might go, not where we should go, but where it will go. And what we realized from this effort fairly quickly was digital allows us to compress all sorts of capabilities in smaller and smaller packages and distribute them all over the economy, ever closer to each moment in time and space. And so therefore, and this is proximity, therefore digital pushes the production and provision of all value ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. We're not talking about a little bit better supply chain management, although that's a nice thing. We're not just talking about digital products like Netflix. Well, I can watch any video I want anywhere, anytime. Sure, we're talking about increasingly physical products as well. Agriculture. In the book, we talk about how we eat, how we create and produce, how we work, how we power, how we defend, how we prevent and cure, space, and virtual reality. And in each of these sectors, it's moving at a different pace, it's moving in a different way, but in all of these sectors, the dominant logic of digital is to bring the production and provision of value ever closer to the moment of demand. So now you know where your industry is going. Let's explore a few examples. This was the most important moment for my mission, at least selfishly I say this, because it opened people's minds and their hearts to realize how profoundly different this near future was going to be. Before ChatGPT, if you needed a crappy speech for your daughter's wedding, you agonized in front of a blank screen for hours and you had a crappy speech. After ChatGPT, you put a prompt in, and seconds later, you have a crappy speech for your daughter's wedding. Now, you got to edit it. You got to reprompt and make sure it's what you want to say. But nonetheless, it happens in seconds. And meanwhile, from your perspective as the user, it's doing absolutely nothing until you need it. Now, we know there are servers in Iceland running in the background, but you don't care. It's at the locus of demand, the moment of demand. The value is created and provided at the locus of demand. A lot of people talk about Sam Altman wanting to raise $7 trillion for a network of chip fabs. He's not going to raise $7 trillion. Just let me underscore this. If you add up the two most valuable companies in human history by market cap, they don't equal $7 trillion. He's not going to raise $7 trillion, but he's playing a very important role. And that is to accelerate the development of chip production. Now, most people recognize he wants more supply. Yes, that's true. But they miss an essential insight that Sam definitely has. He's not just talking about more chip supply. He specifically is advocating for a network of chip fabs all over the world closer to demand. Not more and more in Taiwan and Arizona, but all over the place closer to demand, because he recognizes the geopolitical challenges. He recognizes the climate events. He recognizes the things that will stand in the way of us getting what we need and want. And therefore, we need a distributed model. We need a proximate model. He doesn't call it proximity, but maybe one day soon he will. So today we have a global supply chain optimized for scale manufacturing at a distance. The larger my plant, the lower my costs. During our lifetimes, this model will be ripped apart. We'll increasingly see mid-sized plants closer to demand with reshoring. You've seen some of this already. Some things produced in urban areas, right downtown, and eventually on your counter at home. Compare the old model to the new model. The old model was we mine iron ore in Australia, send it to China, melt it down, make millions of forks, put them in ships, put them in inventory, and hope that my demand planning from 9 months ago was at least somewhat accurate. Today, it is already trivial to download a design file, push a button, and print one custom fork to order. Exactly the fork you want, where and when you want that fork. And if Chip Bailey wants a picture of his kids on his fork, Chip Bailey can get his picture of his kids on his fork. And by the way, there was no demand planning team in history who sat around, I wonder how many of those pictures of Chip's kids' forks we need produced next year. We will be able to do things we could never have done before. And this is the key point. So this is a program from the military. The Air Force last year decided we need to be able to produce drones to spec within 48 hours. They did it. So for this year, they said we need to produce drones within 24 hours to spec. They did it. And you might have noticed, regrettably, the future of warfare is underway in Ukraine right now. From almost a dead start before this conflict to today, they're producing over 90% of all the drones they need. They're designing and producing to order in country. So there are some dark forces as well as light forces that are driving the demand for proximity. In December of 2022, I was in the UAE and I had the opportunity to visit Bustanica, the largest vertical farm in the world right now. It's about 3 miles from the Dubai airport. It's a partnership with Emirates Airlines. First, the quality of these greens is as good as you'd find in a French farmer's market. No offense to Barbara, our French speaker. But the exciting part was the next day when I got on my Emirates Airlines flight back to New York, the lettuce in my salad was picked at this factory the night before. Now again, do the math, compare the model. We grow leafy greens in Spain, harvest it, put it on a ship, send it to a warehouse, and then we hope that it's acceptable in the salad. Here, they grow and pick exactly what they need within miles of the airport. It's going to rise. Is it economical in most cases? Now, of course it's not. But guess what happens with all disruptive technologies? They percolate at the edges. Most of them fail horribly. But some of them rise up, and some of them get better, and they incur into core markets, and they transform the game. And we know this is happening. This is not a, I think maybe, it's going to happen, and you can see it. We're going to hear from Barbara later on. She called me in 2018, I think, and said, Rob, I would like to figure out how to grow food on Mars. I said, it sounded like you said grow food on Mars. And she said, yes, that's what I said. And she said, would you like to invest? I said, no, I'm not a billionaire. I don't have a 60-year time horizon. She laughed. She knew that wasn't my profile. But she also was pretty darn smart. She knew she needed to build a business right here on Earth. And we're going to hear about that later. Gary Hoberman, who's going to follow me, has built a no-code platform, meaning you can create enterprise-grade software without having to know how to code at all. And we'll hear more about that, see more about that. Now, this is a recent video of the woolly mammoth. You might have heard that the woolly mammoths are now rampant in Colorado and Montana. I don't know if you heard that. We do have some twin friends who are seeking to reanimate the woolly mammoth. That hasn't happened yet, but what has happened is that you can go on Sora and you can type in some prompts and you can get this. Where will we be in 20 years? Reality built from whole cloth, anytime, anywhere. So expectations rise. You feel it as business people. You feel it as citizens. You feel it as consumers. We will be able to break trade-offs between customization and cost that we have never been able to break before. Think about that as you watch the examples today. And finally, waste declines dramatically. I'm most excited about that one. I'm going to skip over some of this just to keep us moving, but a quick story that's close to my heart because it illustrates how we can go wrong if we pose the wrong challenges. Anybody know what this is? Say? Bangladesh. Very good, Rajiv. Thank you for being here. Sometimes people say Japan. I'm like, I don't know, maybe on a national holiday or something. So about 14 years ago, the government decided we're going to build enough power generation capacity in Bangladesh to serve all of our citizens and the future by 2023. Guess what? They did it. They achieved their challenge by 2022, ahead of schedule. How often do governments achieve some big objective ahead of schedule? Great. Guess what? It didn't solve the problem. Why is that? Well, they built a bunch of these. Now, we need these. We'll need these for a long time as the energy transition progresses. But they built a bunch of these. They all run on hydrocarbons. Bangladesh doesn't have many hydrocarbons, at least under development. So they're at the mercy of global geopolitics, of the energy industry, et cetera. And then when the war hit, it sucked all the natural gas out of their system, and they were experiencing blackouts, brownouts all over the country. They had the wrong challenge. Now, meanwhile, over the past decade, these started popping up. Distributed energy resources, solar arrays with a battery backup, not because the government had a program, but because a factory needed power. Or a family said, you know what, we can't rely on the grid, let's put some solar panels on the roof. A community said, we're not connected to any grid, we need some power for our cell phones, let's build some solar. These popped up all over the place. It's still a small sliver of Bangladesh's power profile. But imagine if the government 14 years ago had posed a different challenge. Imagine if instead of saying we need enough energy generation in the country to serve the country, which they solved, didn't work, we need to have power available where and when people need it all over Bangladesh. You see how dramatically different that challenge statement is? And it would have generated what we call, in the book, a hybrid solution. And this is where most industries will go over the next decade or two. The indicators of the future are out there. This is a company called Lightyear in Sharjah and Amsterdam. They have solar panels on the top of an EV. It's a beautiful team, beautiful vehicle. They've already gone bankrupt twice. So this is where you all say, oh, yeah, well, they went bankrupt, so that's not going to work. No. There are going to be thousands of bankrupts, deaths we never see. But they're experiments and they're weak signals on the horizon. Proximity. What could be more proximate than a vehicle that collects its own power wherever, whenever it exists? It's on the periphery. Now, this is my favorite story. One of my great heroes, many Twinians have met Dr. Jeffrey Ling. Dr. Ling was a military doctor, an army doctor. He spent 6 tours of duty in the Middle East. And through this, he kept experiencing generic drug shortages. Now, it's not a shocker that if you're in the war zone, you're going to have generic drug shortages. But what did shock me was Dr. Ling, who practices at Johns Hopkins now, says we have generic drug shortages at Johns Hopkins all the time. Hospitals and clinics all over America have generic drug shortages all the time. Look it up. So he said, well, this is ridiculous. If I had the right equipment, I could make the drugs here myself. Generic drugs are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Just give me a chemistry set. So he went back to DARPA. DARPA gave him a big grant, worked with a team from MIT, and they did it. You can look it up. It's called On-Demand Pharmaceuticals. Chip Bailey knows lots about it. If you want to talk to Chip, he's one of the advisors there. They can, in a matter of hours, push a button, say, I need 1,000 doses of atropine, and out come 1,000 doses of atropine. Or I need 300 doses of ciprofloxacin, and out come 300 doses of ciprofloxacin, exactly where and when you need it. The FDA has already confirmed that these are exactly the same as the drug you'd get at the pharmacy. Additionally, they have their first commercial implementation of this already underway in Tupelo, Mississippi, a chronically underserved low-income community. They chose 6 injectables. Start slow. This is healthcare after all. They chose 6 injectables that they'd had chronic stockouts for the entire history of their health system. They switched on this equipment, and since they did so, they've had 0 stockouts. What they need, where and when they need it, completely absolved from global supply chain challenges. So this is coming for every industry. And my question for you to consider while we experience the speakers and each other the rest of the day is, what happens when we can have anything, anywhere, anytime? We're not proposing in the book that it will always be great. In fact, as I said last night, humans are often not very good at making decisions when faced with plenty. But it's coming, so we need to think about it now.